Bruce, where are you? There he is. Come on up, please. Bring your guest. Hello, 50-50 people. I'm gonna get to do something. Come on.
Yeah, I'll go get Frank here.
No, I want Bruce to pull today.
Oh, okay.
Bruce is pulling for $138.
4935.
4935. We have a winner. Bruce? Thank you very much. It's all yours, Bruce.
Good morning. It's my pleasure to introduce our guest speaker, Frank Ohearn. Frank is a local fellow very interested in the history of Gananoque and the Thousand Islands. He grew up and went to school here, then studied public administration at Carleton University in Ottawa. Then he returned to Gananoque and the Thousand Islands. He's maintained great interest in our local history, generally and particularly through his job as Executive Director of the Eastern Workforce and Innovation Board in the economic changes that history has brought us. He's been active in local civics as a 4-term councillor in Gananoque and a 2-term school board trustee. He lives in Gananoque with his wife and 3 adult children. Please welcome Frank Ohearn.
I actually prefer to sit down when I speak, but I'll stand. Okay. I find this quite awkward, actually.
We can bring you a chair.
Give me a chair? No, I'm fine, Colleen. Thank you. So this is quite an interesting crowd. This is very good. So I've never, to be honest with you, I didn't know what Probus was. So now I know. So good for you people. This is great. My God, what a turnout. So as far as a presentation today, first of all, I want to thank and speak. I'm muttering here now. Where's Pat? Pat Boucher. So I want to thank Pat. Pat's the one who railed me into this. So thank you very much. The lovely lady back there, by the way. So I'd like to talk today about a few issues I think that are warm and dear to many of us. One relates to agriculture, water power, transportation systems. Gananoque is a manufacturing hub and its downward cycle. I'd like to talk briefly about the Canadian Shield and workforce issues affecting the world around us. I think personally that the central thesis for change in this community and many changes is transportation systems. I think that's the basis of a lot of change, and with that, of course, is economics, and people want to make a dollar. That's to me is the main focus. And I'm not sure how many people have spoke to this issue before here, so that was one of my questions. I said, how many people have spoken about the history of Gananoque? How many have spoken about the economics of the region? I'm not sure if anybody has. There's a number of people in this room that could speak to this. There's a couple sitting right down at the back. Mr. Garrett can speak on that quite eloquently, by the way. There's a number of people, Bruce Wilson, another number of people. So I would actually, I think this would be more of a community discussion than simply listening to me speak. In terms of my background, I'm a local kid. I was raised on a farm just at Wilstead, Ontario, just down the road from here. Raised on the farm. I moved into Gananoque at the age of 12. My parents bought a nursing home here in Gananoque. We ran it for a number of years. I lived over in Church Street, and I haven't really migrated much from that area all my life. Went to school. Was in Toronto a few times. They wanted me to work in regional offices in Toronto. Whenever I got used to the subway, I said, it's time for me to go home. I was not a Toronto person, trust me. So I love this community, I love the area, I love the people. I've always wanted to grow and prosper. It's always been who I am. As far as my family, we're farmers and we're sailors. That's basically the thesis of it. So the one side of the family, the Scotts and the Kenneys up in Rivers Mills, that's the sailors, and the farmers down in this area, there was the Ohearns and the Lappins, and we were farmers and sailors. That's the background. As far as agriculture, at one time after the war, this region had a number of small little farms dotting the countryside. I think many of you would attest to that. There's some people in here who were raised on farms. I know a few of you here today. And so with the farming system, most farms had they would milk maybe 20 to 30 head of cattle. They would transport that milk into Gananoque in small little trucks. And those trucks it was interesting that the milk cans went into a trough. They didn't go into a refrigerated system. They actually went into a trough, a water trough, a cement trough, or a steel trough. You put the milk into the trough. You lifted the cans from the trough onto a deck. And on from that deck went into a small truck, maybe a 5-ton, 2-ton truck. It would go into Cowan Gate, and they would line up and dump the raw milk into the system, and out came pasteurized milk. It was quite an experience to do that, and that was the Cowan Gate plant down at the waterfront. But that is long since gone, and that's where there is a park down there now. We all enjoy that property, and so it was quite a rough building, to be honest with you, and it provided a lot of good, stable employment for the people in the community. So that evolution of that dairy industry was very strong in the area, extremely strong, and people prospered and grew. And things changed, and so we went to bulk tanks, went to a pasteurized system, a refrigerated system. Either you went into bulk tanks and you increased the size of your farm, or you get out of business. There's a few people sitting right there that know all about that. Anyway, so that's what happened, and things changed. And I always say that, has anybody bought a barn board lately? Barn board or milk cans? Because they were a hot item back in the 80s when farms started to come apart. The barns started to come down, and people sold barn boards and beams and cans. Well, you can't buy them anymore because I think they probably fell apart, or they're in part of somebody's fence or rec room. So anyways, that's what happened as far as agriculture within the area. And so what we have now is the farming community is still there. They're much larger farms. The dairy farms of today, believe it or not, produce about the same amount of milk as they did back in the 30s and 40s and 50s, I should say. So that same amount of milk is being produced, but it's much more controlled. The cattle feeds. So it's a large, very profitable venture, but it's also very time-consuming and very costly. So if you talk to a farmer, some will probably know that will complain about their revenue streams. But it's still a way of life, and as you go out into the countryside, there's still farms there. Some have changed. You have dairy producers. You have Foreman Farms in the north, specializes in agriculture. You have Burnbury Farms in Rockville with bird production. There's different types of farming within the community. It's really a strong asset that we still should recognize. Now, I would suggest that there's probably a number of you who live in that rural countryside, because what happened in my mind is a number of people migrated from Toronto or urban areas. They moved to the area and they bought and built beautiful homes in the countryside because taxes were reasonable, as was construction costs, I would reason. They wanted to live in this beautiful region. So that's, in my mind, what we have, what I call the hinterland. As far as river power, I think all of you are aware of the fact that the town evolved from the river. So the voyageurs, the Croix de Bois, different types of people would come and visit this town from the water. That was the main basis of coming to Gananoque. There's a plaque, I believe, at one of their launching ramps. It said and it says LaSalle landed here. That's quite true. So I don't think we really appreciate the history of this region. So we grew from the water, and we grew from it. There's two streets down at the waterfront. One is called Main, and one is called Market. There's a reason for that. I think we all know the reason for that, because it evolved from the waterfront. Small mills, there was a railway yard went to the waterfront. There was an extensive ferry service that went back and forth in the United States. It was a very, very prosperous area, and that was the main hub for agriculture, not for agriculture, but for transportation of goods. It provided a good ferry service. So I had a cousin of mine, his name was Captain Kenny, and he named us both the Yennik. You know, if you look at Kenny and Yennik, that's backwards for Kenny. Now maybe he was afraid of his Irish heritage, I don't know. I'm sure to hell. Anyways, but that's part of the story. So it was a very flourishing water town at one time with the river. And of course things changed. And the biggest thing that changed in my mind as far as the river and transportation systems was the construction of the Thousand Island Bridge. So with the construction of the bridge in about 1937, 1938, things changed, and with that construction, they didn't have to worry about the ferry service from here back to the United States. They could simply get in a car and cross the Thousand Island Bridge and come into Canada that way. So things changed dramatically, and with that change, in my mind, things changed in terms of the waterfront and the needs for ferry services, etc. Because the main destination point obviously was the United States. So, with the construction of that highway, of that bridge, there was also the construction of the 401. So this was, in my mind, going back to a transportation system. So Gananoque has always had the benefit of, quote, the King's Highway coming through our town. So before the 401 went through, before the changes in the river system, everybody moved up and down that highway. It was just a trail. It was called the King's Highway, and it was just simply a trail, and it evolved into a road. And so as a result of that road and the highway, it was a very busy affair. And so what happened when the 401 went through, we were bypassed. So as we're all aware, the 401 runs to the north of us, runs through Brockville, runs outside of Prescott, but it bypassed the town. And with that change, we lost a tremendous amount of traffic that went through the town, tremendous. I was told that at one time there was 18 gas stations in Gananoque. 18. Now think about it, because that was the main destination point with transport cars, and there was all kinds of, quote, hot spots along this road out there. Hot spots, you know what they are? They're called bad spots. In other words, there's chemical discharges all in it's contaminated soil. There's lots of them around, I'm told. So don't dig too deep. Trust me. But anyway, so that happened, and with that, the town evolved and changed. I'm told that there was some concern by some of the merchants about the impact of it, and I think the impact was very, very serious in terms of the economies of the town. The town itself does not have an industrial park. Okay, so there's very few industrial parks along this corridor. There's one in Brockville, there's one in Kingston, there's none in Prescott, there's none in North Grenville. And I think part of the reason why there's no industrial parks is the fact that this is part of the Canadian Shield, believe it or not. So there's some land here that could be developed. I'm just going to point that way. But it's all rock, and it's very expensive to dig into and to change into an industrial park. In the manufacturing sector, and if anybody wants to start a business, they don't want to go in and have to build a site, and they want it site ready. And that's one of the difficulties the town has in terms of drawing in industry into the town. And it's been quite significant in my mind. Now, as far as the manufacturing sector in the town also was, it prospered as a result of the Gananoque River and its river systems. I'm going back to when I talked originally about the waterfront. So the reason people came to this town is it was the waterfront, it's the beauty, and also there's the Gananoque River. So the Gananoque River produced water power. It ran different types of turbines, mills. I'm not sure what was back there, but all I know is that it was heavily, there was a number of manufacturers that set up their bases along the Gananoque River and the part going into the St. Lawrence River. I'm also told, and I believe this is quite true, that I wouldn't want to stick I wouldn't want to take a shovel of silt from the Gananoque River, because it's heavily contaminated, folks. If you don't think it isn't, you're dreaming, because it is. And the reason that it's contaminated, there was very few environmental controls back in the day, and industry simply was here and they dumped everything in the river. I was told the story, whether it's true, that they dumped this, whatever it was, in the river, and fish were jumping out of the river. I'm not joking. So it was a planing company, and that's what I'm told. So anyway, some of the river is heavily contaminated, and so just don't disturb it. Don't be afraid of it, but just don't disturb it. So that's part of the river and the river systems, and there's various industries evolved and grew along that river basin. So you can go to Stelco, you can go to different types of plants, shovel factories, manufacturing of wood, different types of steel products. Now, what happened what happened was that as a result of NAFTA and the free trade, I think everybody's aware of this one, I hope. As a result of NAFTA and the free trade in the 80s, when Reagan and Mulrooney made a deal with a free trade agreement, things did prosper and things evolved. But a lot of companies moved out of Gananoque. A lot of them moved out of Gananoque. Stelco moved out, Manchester Plastics moved out. There was a number of industries that changed their location as a result of NAFTA and the free trade. I was told that Stelco, there was a hammer forging plant in Stelco for a number of years there, and it was a drop forge. So for those who aren't aware of it, it went all night. It went all night, and when they dumped there, at certain times of the night, they would dump pieces of steel down some type of I'm not sure what it was, but you could hear it all through the town. So it was just constant boom, boom, boom. It was heavy work. I was told that there was 5 men would work on one piece of equipment, and those 5 men, one of them was always off on a break of 15 minutes because it was so heavy. So it was heavy steel work, and the drop forges would come down and they would bang. They would just hear this bang, and you'd hear the sparks go. Now the locals, you know what the locals called that place? Disneyland. It was called Disney. It was it paid very well. Very well. A lot of families prospered from that plant. But that was called Disneyland, and then they moved the forges one way. It was in Gananoque, and the next day I heard a few days down the road it was sitting in Mexico. Now, a lot of these companies were making money. I want to emphasize this. They were making money. The problem was they weren't making enough for the shareholders. So, going back to NAFTA and free trade, I'm not trying to beat up NAFTA and free trade, but I guess I am. But anyway, so things changed, and they were making money, but not enough money. So now, if we go fast forward as to what's going on in today's world with the economy, we're kind of in a corner in my mind as far as where we are right now. So we'll just have to have faith that we'll work our way through the system that we're currently operating. So I talked to a few people beforehand about losing money, like the companies losing money, and a number of people said yes, that was the case. A lot of companies they were all making money, but just not enough money, and so things evolved. There's one company in town called Thompson Ribbon, the Wing family. I just like to compliment the Wing family because I think at one time that company could have left town to simply shut it down. They chose to stay and prosper, and they're still there today. And I really think it compliments that family and that company for still sticking it, because it's the only rivet company left. I'm told that at one time during the Second World War, that if I get a drink of water from somebody, please.
Right in front of you.
Where?
Right down there.
Right down there. All right, thank you, sir. I'm told at one time during the Second World War that this area was looked at as a target for the Germans to bomb, simply because of the number of rivets that were being produced in the area. So they considered it a target simply because of rivet production, because a lot of rivets were made here. And It was at one time referred to as the Little Birmingham. I've heard that term before as used. It's referred to as the Little Birmingham, reference to Birmingham in England. So anyways, my point is that industry did flourish, it did grow. We still have some good stable industries here, but it would be nice if we have an industrial park, but don't count on that to happen anytime soon, because I don't think it'll ever going to happen. And we have been affected by transportation systems. Now, I'm not going to speak about high-speed rail here today, okay, guys? I'm not going to bore you with that. I have some friends of mine who are just hostile about the whole thing about high-speed rail. But I'm going back to the Canadian Shield. Do you think that if you got a track coming down, it's supposed to be straight, for 300 miles an hour, they want a straight track? I think the Canadian Shield may cause a little bit of an anomaly, maybe a little bit weird. So that's why maybe they're heading north. I'm not sure. I'm just surmising here on that. My other hat that I wear is I do work for the Eastern Workforce Innovation Board. You know, we're a small group of people. We do labor market studies. I work with Sandy Wright, and Sandy's local here. She's brilliant, and we do work on labor market information studies for the community, and we're funded by the province of Ontario. So we're just a small little office. There's just two of us. But there's a couple of points I just want to raise with you that I think may interest you. One of the big issues in this region is the fact that we have an aging population, as you're all aware. Look around the room here today, guys. I can't resist this one. So I was in Kingston at the theater one time, and this friend of mine, John Bilton, sitting there beside me. So anyways, John says, "Look at all the cotton heads." I said, "What are you talking about, John?" He says, "Well, all the cotton heads are here tonight." So, well, folks, you're all here, and I'm one of them, okay? So you can't get away from that. So anyway, so the going back to my story about the population. So the population of this area is need of growth. There's more people actually dying in this area that are being born. The only reason the area is growing slightly, and it's grown by about maybe 2,000 or 3,000 people. Right now, the population of Leeds Grenville is about almost 110,000 people. So it's grown about maybe 700 people in the last few years. The only reason it's grown is through migration patterns, okay? So what I'm referring to is not immigration. These are not immigrants coming in from another country. These are people moving in from urban centers into the area. So I would reason there's a number of you here today who fit into that category, right? Right? So that's good. That's what we want. Everybody a few years ago was fighting for that. We want people to move into the area. We want it to grow and prosper. I've also been told that if you're sitting in the township, the number one election issue is what? Have we got a guess on it? If a politician's knocking on your door, you want to whine about something. You know what you whine about?
Healthcare.
Roads. Roads, baby. Everybody wants good roads. I don't blame them. So they want to move to an area. They want to be comfortable, and they want roads. So I'm going to go on my little tangent here. So at one time there was lots of stores in certain key areas, so like in Gananoque and different areas, and we create road systems. So we create these road systems again, transportation systems. So you get in your car, and you don't drive normally to a Gananoque, you'll get up and you drive to Kingston, to maybe the Cat Center or someplace, and because of the road system, because it generates, it's easy, and that's what you want to do. You want to sit in your car. Now, what's interesting now is that if you look at what's happening now with after COVID-19 and the changes in the digital economy, is now you can order online. It's quite fascinating if you really think about it. You can turn. My daughter orders kitty litter on a box, and it's just delivered to her front door. Think about it. I bet you if you do that yourself, right? So all I'm trying to say is that the economies are changing all the time, and I find that piece of it fascinating from a road system so the concern that I have personally is that we create these systems, and then people start to use them, and then something else happens. And so what's going to happen to the CAT centers? You want them to grow and prosper. They hire people, they work with people, but it's all part, again, of a system. And I'm going back to my thesis on transportation systems, communication systems. and it's becoming more and more, much more and more prolific. As far as the region, the big issue again is the population base. We want it to grow and prosper. There's a different amount of social issues that affect the local economy. So what are those social issues? I think you're all aware of them. There's housing, which is a significant issue. There's housing, there's mental health issues, there's drug addiction issues, there's mental illness, addiction, homelessness. It's all there around us. Now, I worked for a number of years in Kingston, so I worked in downtown Kingston for a number of years within the employment center. So I know all the agencies, and I still do that today. So I deal with a lot of the different social service agencies in Kingston, Brockville, Prescott, and I have a pretty good sense of what's going on. So anyways, the big issue here is that the issues that were normally confined to large urban centers like Montreal and Toronto, I'm referring to homelessness, drug addiction, like all like if it was a 1 to 10, like they're about 8 or 9. We're hitting about 3 or 4, okay? So what's going on now is those issues that were evident in large urban centers are now here with us today. They're right outside that door, and it's mostly people, and there's all kinds of people with different issues and problems. So those issues are here, and I don't think they're going to go away. Now, one of the big issues that's come up through was a colleague that I dealt with up in Algonquin College. He's one of the deans, anyways. His thesis is that a lot of the people who work in EMS services, police, fire, ambulance services, social services, are inundated with a very, very difficult clientele that they've never dealt with before, and they don't know how to deal with them. It's not that they don't have the abilities to deal with them, but suddenly they're there with them, and it's caused a lot of issues. And people don't speak to this very often. People do not talk about this stuff, and because they don't want to talk about it. But it's clearly there, and we see it in our day-to-day operations in terms of people not accessing employment insurance benefits or different types of social service benefits within the region. So it's become apparent, and a lot of people who at one time would live in the countryside, and they were, these are people who are disadvantaged and have different types of issues. But normally they would live in the countryside, housing was cheap, and they would simply drive in and get services and drive back. But what's happening is those people don't have the money for those cars anymore, the housing. They sold the houses, that's gone. They moved into Kingston, again, they moved in, they live here. So the whole dynamics, again, has changed. I find it quite fascinating, that part of it. Now, some people are a bit sensitive when I make that statement, but transportation systems continue and are a critical piece of this whole exercise in terms of growth. And the bottom line is that it costs money to transport people. And so a lot of bus companies that struggle to make ends meet because they just simply don't have the numbers to justify their existence, and they go to business. So in terms of the area, when COVID hit, there was a problem in the service sector getting people with certain types of skill sets to work in that sector. So a lot of employers were not happy with the quality of people applying and knocking on their doors. And it became a serious problem, and that problem has not gone away. There's still a demand in the service sector for people in the culinary arts, that type of occupations and skilled trades. Unfortunately, St. Lawrence College chose to stop their culinary arts program, and that program has ceased. I'm not blaming the college, but it is supposed to be called a community college, a local community college. And that's all I'm going to say on that point. I could go on that one, but anyways, and so they're in needs. And my last point is that if you go into the CAT Center in Kingston and you look around who's behind the counter, who are you going to see? Who you're going to see is a number of foreign students. Most of them are Indian students, and most of them are students from St. Lawrence College. And those are the people working, a lot of them in the CAT Center. Some of them could be Queens, but most of them will be from the college system. And so the question now is, with the changes in the student visas, how that's going to impact, because a lot of those people will have to go back to their home country. So what I'm told is that a lot of these students came from just so you know, a lot of these students that attended the colleges came from very impoverished families in India, okay? These are people whose mother and fathers, just like you and I, have our kids and want them to prosper. They put all their money and they invested that into these children to come to Canada to live and study. And so they came here hoping to be able to start up a new career and to prosper in this region. So a lot of those students simply they don't have enough money to sustain themselves on their own. They had to take secondary employment. So my point is that a lot of those students that are working there now, I'm not sure what the status is going to be in the spring when the spring is here, in terms of them being able to continue to work in that type of employment. So it's going to impact in that sector, because there is a lot of students who work in that sector and also who work in the healthcare sector very, very quietly. I'm going to stress that, very quietly. So there will be impacts on that. Now, obviously, go back into the same argument about housing as to why there was changes in the housing criteria, where the feds made that change and reduction of the number of immigrant visas and student visas. That impacted on those numbers. It impacted on the college system. My personal opinion is that we at our office, Sandy and I, would always promote immigration. We always promote immigration because we need people to move into the area. So we turn around and promote immigration. Then we find out that nobody is watching them. No one's watching the gate, and things got out of control, and it just overwhelmed the system. And that's why that was one of the reasons we had problems with our housing issues. It's one of many issues. Healthcare continues to be an issue in the region. A lot of people they're burnt out after COVID-19. A lot of people just left. You couldn't imagine the number of jobs that were open for work during COVID-19 and afterwards, and they couldn't fill the jobs. Nobody wanted to work. There was a bad taste out there, and things have changed. A lot of older workers would work at different service sectors, and they left. You can see it every day. They're returning, and one of the reasons they're returning is simply because they have to be able to put food on their table at night, and it's an economic need, and the employers like that older worker, like that, because we're mature. We come to work on time. We don't complain. We do our job, and that there's a difference between how employers work at. I'm not getting into ZX or ZP. I'm not getting into that stuff. But anyways, that was part of that. And how much longer do you want me to go here? All right? Does anybody have any questions?
You painted a pretty bleak picture of Gananoque area. I'd like to hear some positive solutions.
I'm not a politician, okay? all I'm trying to say is that it's bleak. It's a beautiful region. That's why we live here today. That's why I stayed. It's a lovely area. It's a good place to raise your children. It has good schools, transportation systems. It's a great place to live if you've got the money to live here. And that's part of the question. But there's lots of positive elements to live in this region. There's no question in my mind. That's again why we're here. But there were certain challenges that this region went through, and we continue to go through today. Would you like to add? Like, what have I missed? Come back to me.
Well, you haven't addressed the issue of, going forward. What can we perhaps do as a community, not necessarily politicians? I look at the downtown, for example. There is no commerce. I mean, the commerce that's there does not attract people from other areas. I used to live in Westport, for example, and it attracts people from all over due to commerce, small shops, etc. We don't have that.
Well, I call it supply and demand, to be honest with you. So, like, to me, it's supply and demand, and I've had, my wife complains all the time about the quality of the shops. And I said, well, it's nothing to stop anybody from, you know, selling underwear, because that's usually the central theme in this town. You can't buy underwear. Let's be honest. So, but all I'm trying to say is that it's supply and demand in my mind, and I think the town has done a great job in promoting. Maybe they could do more. Again, I'm not involved in that game anymore, and so we can. My concern is with the way that it's going with the digital economy, and a lot of businesses in that downtown core are struggling. And I talk to them, I go into them, I use them, and I just suggest that we buy local. And
If I can just add, my understanding is one of the issues, perhaps I'm wrong, but one of the biggest issues is rent. The cost of renting a place seems to be prohibitive for a lot of businesses, even new businesses. And I don't know whether it's a town thing or it's an individual, ownership thing.
Well, I'm told that my understanding is that on the corporate side for businesses, people are not interested in renting those storefronts simply because of the cost. I talked to another business person, and he said there's more money in just residential properties than there is in storefronts. And if you could rent those out as storefronts, you could make more money. There's no demand. And I'm not sure if I'm answering your question, but as far as rent controls, I'm not getting involved in that one. Bruce? I'm sorry.
Do you have any thoughts on how the expansion in the north and the Arctic might affect the south? Or any thoughts on that?
I would hope that RMC would prosper. The military college, the base at Kingston would prosper. I think that would be a great piece of it. I don't see any direct relationship to this specific community, but perhaps Kingston. I worked in Kingston it's still a very vibrant community. It's growing, it's prospering. The small towns like Gananoque, there's Lansdowne, you go down the corridor, they're struggling. Rockville's doing quite well. Rockville actually is doing quite well. Prescott is kind of coming up a bit and is doing quite well. Rockville has an industrial park, so does Kingston have an industrial park. But I think you need to have investments to accommodate industry coming into the region of any kind. And everybody is open for anything. The problem is people are leaving. And again, I'm sorry if I'm too negative, but I'm pretty blunt. I don't pull any punches.
Just a comment, you spoke about agriculture. When I moved to Gananoque in 1971, I worked in the agriculture sector. And on Highway 2 from Rockville to Kingston, there were 22 milk shippers. Today there are 3. There are none from Rockville to Gan, and there's still 3 on Highway 2 out west, Webb's, McLean's, and that's it. But farming in this area is still vibrant. You mentioned Foreman Farms. Everybody used to farm 100 or 200 acres. I think Foreman Farms do about 2,000 now. And there are lots of farms out there doing 500 to 1,500 acres. We're still a vibrant agricultural community.
They produce soybeans. A lot of farmers will produce soybeans on the side. So it's simply the crash crops. They use their lands that way. Like Horton Farms, like sugar producers. There's different industries within the agricultural sector.
I don't have a question, but I remember my first night in Gananoque. I came here to teach at 19, a few years ago. And the first night, those hammers went off. And I remember coming down the next morning, the gals and I stood and said, "Oh, I meant to tell you." All night long, those hammers, bang, bang, bang.
Yes. One more there,
Yeah,
Janet.
I just want to talk about what you talked. I grew up less than a block from the hammers. Midnight Saturday, when those hammers stopped because they didn't run all Sunday, I woke up. Until midnight Sunday, when they started up.
There you go. Thank you.
Frank? Pleasure to have you with us today. Frank and I work together. Frank and I worked together on town council, and there were many times I admired his dedication and his courage when you had to stand tall on tough decisions. So I thank you for that. We have a small gift for you of bread.
Why bread?
Bread has been a staple of life throughout history, and it's seen in many forms in every culture. The breaking and sharing of bread is symbolic of life, peace, and friendship. This loaf of bread is given to you as a symbol of our friendship, and thanks for sharing with us today.
Thank you, Bruce, and thank you, Frank. I want to thank everybody for coming today, but we have a few announcements. Susan has one. Come on up. Anybody else? Come on up. Oh, you can pick those up after the meeting.
Hello, I would like to, we had our last line dancing class yesterday, and I would like to thank all of our line dancers who came and danced with us and had a lot of fun. And we're going to start again in November, so come and join us then. And I'd like to really thank June. She's organizes all of this line dancing and always comes and dances with us and has a good time, and thank you. And yesterday she brought us each a beautiful, Linda and I, each a beautiful bouquet of flowers. They're absolutely lovely. Thank you very much for that, June. And do think of coming in November. We have a lot of fun. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello everyone, just a reminder that we have our travel tales following this meeting today. Today, Jerry Valahora is going to be telling us all about sharing a home in South America, in Argentina, and everything about the area. So please, if you'd like to stay, it's very informal. We just gather chairs around at the front, and it's open, it's an open discussion. It's not a presentation and then questions, it's an open discussion. And then the following month, Pam Wellborn is going to be talking to us about Australia and New Zealand. And if any of you are interested in making a presentation to the group, just email me. I'd love to know, or talk to me, and we'll add you onto the rotation. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. Julie.
Thank you. For those of you that might not be able to make it to Sue Baker and the Rhythm Makers next Wednesday night, the 22nd, they will be performing in Gananoque again on Friday, May the 8th at the Royal Theatre. It will be a benefit dance for the Royal Theatre, but you don't have to dance. We'd love you to dance. There's going to be a bit of a dance floor, not a big one, but a bit of a dance floor. But it's also, there'll be cabaret tables there as well. So Friday, May 8th, Sue Baker and the Rhythm Makers will be at the Royal Theatre. So we had another chance to hear them, and they are worth listening to. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. And that's that. We are done. Enjoy your month, and we'll see you back here.